Ken Levinson, the Executive Director of the Passive House Network, and it's my honor to welcome you all to this very special edition of PHN Presents. The Passive House Network is a national nonprofit that connects global capacity with regional needs, and we have chapters such as Passive House Rocky Mountains to help us make it happen. Our organization provides education and community to professionals and consumers across the building industry so they can make the best design and construction decisions every time. If you're a builder or designer and want Passive House training, there are trainings in Colorado and across the country happening in the new year, which you can find on our website. We're all about showing that if we work together, we can build a better world. In today's program, we'll hear from families who tragically lost their homes to the Marshall Fire almost 1 year ago and about their journeys of rebuilding so far. They include Susan Nadell, Michelle and Peter Ruprecht, and Casey and Kevin Lombardo. Thank you to each for making time to share your stories with us. We'll also hear from the teams of architects and builders committed to rebuilding better, committed to delivering Passive House performance. We'll introduce the team members with owners as we move through the program. We'll start by setting the context, then we'll hear a round of brief project descriptions from each team, and then we'll have an extended conversation. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat function. Some questions may be answered in the chat straight away, and others will be fed into our conversation later on. It's my pleasure to also have Jessica Hunter co-host this event. Jessica is an architect and president of the Colorado Green Building Guild. It was a recent guild event called Build Forward that was the impetus for our gathering today. We saw at that event inspiring examples of resilience and visions for a better future. It seemed appropriate to have a modest celebration of sorts, bringing together these efforts here today and sharing them so we all may learn from each other, be inspired, and encourage us all to break out of the status quo. So let's get started. Jessica, take it away.
Thanks, Ken. So I just want to start by sharing some of the things that this group of people have experienced in the past year. The Marshall Fire took place on December 30th of 2021, igniting in unincorporated Boulder County, later reaching the town of Superior and the city of Louisville. Next slide, please. The first official reports of a fire came at 11 a.m. Winds gusted to 115 miles per hour, turning over FedEx trucks and drawing flames across city lines. The fire jumped the highway, spot fires found fuel across dry landscapes, embers got pulled into soffits and under houses through vents, burning homes from the inside out. One house leading to the next. Next slide. The wind began to die at about 4 p.m. as the sun went down, leaving structure fires to rage overnight. By morning, the wind had died, the temperatures had dropped, and snow began to fall. In less than 24 hours, over 1,000 families had their lives turned upside down. Next. Marshall is not the first of its kind. Since 2005 in the United States, over 97,000 structures have been destroyed by wildfires, over 2/3 of which were in California. Marshall Fire accounts for only 1% of these structures. In fires like this, next slide, the spark is only a small piece of the puzzle. The 2018 Ranch Fire, which is currently California's 3rd largest wildfire in history, was started when a farmer drove their hammer into a metal stake. A small, hot metal fragment landed in dry grass, a fire started, and it was out of control before it could be contained. Next slide. In the case of Marshall, the spark itself is still disputed, but the conditions are not. Next. Unprecedented rainfall in May caused an explosion of growth in the grasslands. Next. This was followed by months of severe drought, causing grass to dry completely. When you combine wind, fuel, and spark, devastation can follow. Next. 1,084 homes were destroyed by this fire. 149 homes were damaged. 6,026 acres burned. totaling more than countless dollars of damage. Next slide. So before the dust settled from the Marshall Fire, it became very clear that recovery from this event would not be easy or straightforward. And it's important for us to understand the challenges that homeowners faced if we want to learn from their success stories. First and foremost, homeowners impacted by the Marshall Fire are largely underinsured. Next slide. Only 8% of homeowners were covered by a policy with guaranteed replacement. That means despite material escalation, labor shortages, or changes to building code requirements, the policy provides coverage of replacement fully to the home with a similar quality, square footage, finishes. Next slide. This leaves 92% of homeowners underinsured for amounts of $100,000 to $250,000, depending on the actual cost of construction at the time of the project. This means that most homeowners, if they want to rebuild, must make their mortgage payment alongside a construction loan payment, which is a huge hardship that many homeowners can't accomplish. To complicate matters, I've heard dozens of stories of homeowners who were either denied additional coverage or told they were overinsured days even before the fire, and now they face a very difficult financial situation. The second piece of the context that's important to understand is that in the fall of 2021, less than 2 months before the fire, the city of Louisville had adopted one of the most rigorous energy codes in the state of Colorado, the 2021 IECC, with a mandatory net zero energy appendix. In the context of COVID and the underinsurance issue that spread across the community, these codes were seen as a substantial hardship to a lot of homeowners. In the early days after the fire, energy codes became the boogeyman for one of the reasons homeowners were afraid they couldn't rebuild. But despite all of this, today we get to hear about 3 families who are rebuilding their homes and choosing to prioritize health, comfort, and resilience by opting into Passive House. And they aren't alone. So what happened? At the end of February, less than 2 months after the fire, Xcel, a local utility company for Coloradans, announced a rebate program to incentivize homeowners to build better than their local energy codes required. You can go to the next slide. The program has a tiered set of rebates ranging from the 2021 IECC to Passive House. Next slide. Homes achieving Passive House, which include PHI Low Energy, PHI Classic, and FIAS, receive a rebate of $37,500. Next slide. To sweeten the deal, the Colorado Energy Office announced an additional $10,000 rebate for homes designed to be all-electric ready, providing a total of $47,500 to all-electric Passive House projects. Next slide. These rebates were complemented by substantial discounts offered by high-performance manufacturers to Marshall Fire homeowners through a program organized by Boulder County. Manufacturers include Alpin, a local Colorado Passive House window company, 475 High Performance Building Supply, and Mitsubishi. Next. While financial incentives began to tip the scales, it was clear that homeowners and many professionals, builders and designers, didn't understand the cost, benefits, or requirements of some of these programs. This started a grassroots, homeowner-inspired education movement that began weeks after the fire and evolved as financial incentives came to light. These efforts connected local jurisdictions, nonprofits, professionals, and homeowners, helping them collaborate, share resources, hold workshops. The message: resilient, fire-wise homes are healthy homes, are comfortable homes, are energy efficient homes, are practical homes, and are sometimes Passive House homes. And you don't have to win the lottery to build one. Next. Next. Fast forwarding to today, in the city of Louisville, 180 rebuilding permits have been submitted, and 57% of those opt in for a higher level of energy code than is required. In the town of Superior, 65% of permits are opting for building beyond the energy code. And the 3 projects presented today are not going to be the only 3 Passive House projects either.
All right. Thank you, Jessica, for that overview to get us started. Lots of questions coming to mind right off the bat, but we're really glad to be here to take a look at the first of three home rebuilds for the Lombardo residents. The homeowners, Casey and Kevin Lombardo, are here, along with the architects, Maggie Wilchin and Morgan Law of Shape Architecture, and the builder, Frank Weddingkamp of Livingcraft. Morgan and Maggie will give the initial overview, and then we'll circle back at once the reviews have been done, and Jessica will come back and we'll do Q&A then. Take it away, Morgan and Maggie.
Awesome, thanks, Ken. If you'll go to the first slide. Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm joined with Morgan here to give you this overview for the Lombardo residents. We'll just be talking a little bit about our process working with Livingcraft and homeowners Kevin and Casey to design their home. This project is pursuing the Passive House low energy building standards, which does qualify for the $37,000 Xcel rebate. And on the last slide, if you'll go back. So.
Can you go back one?
Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
We wanted to just include the sketch. It's been really important to us because it captures both the essence of our design and also the vision and the mindset of Kevin and Casey that has been so paramount to our process so far. Next slide.
So yeah, super briefly, we started Shape in 2015 with kind of a mission to provide healthier, more sustainable, more energy efficient homes, and have kind of since been doing that and have been heavily involved in the Front Range and throughout the state in various efforts. Obviously nothing is as massive and coordinated as the Marshall Fire rebuild, but we've been in the trenches for a while, and we're excited that so many families are choosing this path. Next.
And before we get into the process, just a quick shout out to our team. We have Frank Weddingkamp with Livingcraft Design Build, Avery Ellis with Avery Ecological Design, and owners Kevin and Casey, who actually bought a selfie stick to take this picture. Next slide.
So here's just a little bit of context for this specific project. We're working with a small handful of families here, but this one in particular, working with Kevin and Casey, you can kind of see on the right side here, very typical kind of suburban neighborhood that's obviously looking a lot different now. But I think one of the nice things about their specific lot is that we were lucky in the fact that there is a pretty good south-facing element that would help kind of guide the design. Next. I know these are a little traumatic to show, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on them, but I think, again, just the drastic kind of difference there post-fire. On the left, that was just a little bit after the fire, a couple months. We met on site with Kevin and Casey. And that was the first time we really saw the devastation firsthand, and it was traumatic, even for us being there. And then on the right side, again, same exact site. You can see the retaining wall in the back on both pictures, kind of post cleanup. So kind of a bizarre context to be working in. Next. So pretty early on, we, decided that we wanted to go this route using one of the Passive House standards. We weren't sure which one that was going to be, but Kevin and Casey kind of brought it to us and were very adamant. And I believe it was even partly their kids who were like, what are we doing here? We got to build as best as we can and do the best thing possible, which is one of the many awesome things about kids. So it was really cool that they were excited about it and brought it to us, because we've spent the last almost decade educating people to the benefits of this standard. So, we decided, just from kind of a design perspective, that, could we take the garage volume and move it outside of the thermal envelope? And that just simplified a lot of the detailing, air sealing, and it also kind of provided an ability to have an outdoor space that connects both the backyard with the front, because that was, one thing that they brought to us early on was this kind of disconnect between the front and the back of their property. Next. So pretty early on, we got on board we worked with several consultants, but we worked with one here that did some kind of preliminary modeling. On the left side, you can kind of see the kind of schematic volume that we were working with. It kind of gives you an idea of that based off that sketch we just looked at. And then obviously we look pretty quickly at the context, the shading factors, how that impacts the overall gains and losses of the envelope. Next. And again, working with our consultant, we identified a couple different strategies in terms of, what balancing cost versus the standard energy efficiency and the metric that we would choose to get. So I think that's, another great thing about this rebate program and the passive house standard in general is that there isn't really one specific prescriptive path. There's multiple standards, and we are pretty agnostic about how to get there. And I think different sites would, if you take a look at this graph, there's on the right side, there's PHI low energy versus PHI classic. But honestly, with different sites and different conditions and different families, different size houses, there's all sorts of different potential solutions for this community. Next. So here, again, working with our consultant, we used to do all this stuff in-house, but it's so nice to work with people that do it all the time and are much faster and better at it. But we identified kind of as a team with Frank, the builder, and the clients that, we were up against a lot of unknowns in terms of the building culture and subcontractors and a lot of unknowns with pricing. So we did decide to pursue the PHI low energy building, although to Kevin and Casey's credit, they were pushing for the strong Kool-Aid from the beginning, the PHI classic, which we considered for as long as possible. But when it came down to it, it was basically jumping to a entirely different wall assembly. So we, based on, again, their specific needs and program and square footage and site, this standard felt like the best option for them. Next.
Yeah, so as Morgan insinuated, all those graphics and the analysis performed by building type informed our wall assemblies right off the bat. So just briefly, our typical exterior wall assembly dense packs double stud wall with an interior service cavity separated from the double stud structure by an interior vapor barrier. And this allows holes to be made on the interior of the house without penetrating the thermal envelope. And it also allows plumbing and electrical to be located and routed as needed without much risk of, again, penetrating the thermal envelope. Our roof is just a 14-inch vented roof at the top and a service cavity here as well for the same reasons. And then our ground floor slab is actually 10 inches of foam board below 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood below wood flooring. And all of these were decided from the very get-go. And particularly that ground floor assembly is somewhat unique, relative to code builds. But it's great for airtight homes where curing a concrete slab might be challenging. So just a brief walkthrough of our floor plans. For us, it felt as though the design process overall was really streamlined. With these rebates being offered, it makes it easier for homeowners to decide upfront whether they want to pursue a passive house certification. And for us, that then makes our process easier because we don't come into the process blindly. We know exactly what our goals are, and it makes everything a little bit more easy. So Kevin and Casey, like Morgan said, were very upfront prioritizing passive house certification. And they also had a very clear idea of their desired program from the get-go. And they were super design savvy and excited to think creatively with us. So as Morgan mentioned before, understanding their prioritization, passive house design criteria and constraints became the origin point of our design, which greatly reduced the amount of, I guess, design backpedaling, where you're trying to incorporate super insulation and air tightness and high performing windows after the fact. It was all anticipated from the beginning. So the main takeaways for the floor plan: this lower level, we have the garage outside the thermal envelope, which, as Morgan said, greatly simplified the geometry. And another important, oh, sorry. Go back to the other one. Another.
Yeah, we can, maybe we should move on. We're running pretty close on time, so we can go to the upper level. I think, yeah, just as Maggie was saying, we want to try to keep that thermal envelope as simple as possible, but no one wants to live in a cube. So, it's part of that is adding these external features that basically from the street make it seem like, it's you don't really understand where it's stopping and starting, so that it feels a lot more livable and spaces are connected. But again, from a building science perspective, the geometry is kept very simple. Sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
No, yeah, and just tagging on to that, a big part of the organizing factor for this house, I think, was the indoor-outdoor connection through both physical connection, providing that roof deck above the garage to directly connect you to the backyard from the inside, but also views, windows that connect you to views of the mountains and views of the neighborhood. So that was probably our main organizing principle. Let's see. Yeah, and I think too, given the proportionally large wall thicknesses, it really challenged our design team to think creatively about the efficiency of the space and really keep that footprint small so that you can prioritize those exterior spaces, as Kevin and Casey had wanted from the beginning. So yeah, these 3D views, that last slide we were on, we rotated the roof so that it was facing south, which allowed us to prioritize photovoltaics, but also created an extra program of kids' loft space up on the main level or up on the upper level. So it's kind of just like the give and take there, all while keeping the geometry simple. And then the interior view just shows kind of the space quality as a result of keeping the floor plan open on the main level and keeping the indoor-outdoor connection maintained.
Next.
And that's it.
Yeah, we had on a closing note, it's just been so awesome working with this family and the collaboration between the builder and us, and yeah, we're super grateful for it. So thanks.
It's a fun note. Thank you, Maggie and Morgan. Great, very impressive project. Great to see this work. So let's move on to introduce our second rebuild project, the Enclave Residence. Susan Nadell, the homeowner, is here with us. Kim and Jutta Cinco of Baseline Design are the architects, and Mark Attard of Hammerwell is the builder. And again, we'll have Kim and Jutta provide the overview.
Great. Thank you, Ken. So we are Baseline Design. My name is Kim Cinco.
Hi, I'm Jutta.
First of all, thank you for having us, and thanks for having this event. We really appreciate getting to pause for a moment and celebrate some of these projects. It's a really super forward-thinking group, obviously. We feel really honored to be part of that and part of the rebuild project. We wanted to start with this photograph that Jutta took on Susan and Malcolm's property. It shows it backing to open space, Davidson Mesa, for those of you who are local, and the unobstructed views they have of the mountains. And we've just found it to be a really powerful image with the char on the fence from the fire, and then also the flowers showing the rebuilding and the regrowth that we're starting to see.
And we live in Lafayette with our 2 daughters and love this community so much. We have friends and family members who also lost homes, and we know how hard it can be. It has been. And on a more personal level, during my teens, my family lost our home to a fire. So this is a personal project for us on so many levels. Next slide, please.
So actually, you can go back one.
Yeah, go back one.
Perfect. So this is the design. This is from the street. It's in the Enclave neighborhood. This is the front of the house. It's a ranch style home, single story over a basement, a relatively simple floor plan. So what we tried to do architecturally was add some interest and some articulation in plan with how we pushed and pulled these volumes, and in section with different roof heights and slopes and clerestory windows.
So as Kim mentioned, it was derived from a simple plan, actually a very efficient and beautiful simple plan. And from that, we came up with simple interlocking volumes that are enhanced by the use of different materials. And so the resulting massing and materials allow different sort of readings depending on where you are. So from this street view, for example, you see more of the lighter colored stucco. And as you go to the backyard, next slide, please, you see more of the stone. And this is intentionally done in order to associate the house's backyard side to belong to the open space and the Rockies and the flat irons beyond. Next slide, please.
So from the get-go, when we started, we took a lot of our inspiration from Susan and Malcolm. There was a lot about their previous home that they really loved and wanted to maintain in the new design. This plan on the right was drawn by Malcolm, and when we show you later the final plan, you'll see we really changed very little.
Right.
And the image on the left was their former home. You can see the slightly southwestern feel, and that was something they liked and wanted. They wanted again, but we're open to maybe a more modern take on it. And you can see the beautiful plantings surrounding the house. That connection to the yard and to nature was also something that was important for them to maintain.
Next slide, please.
Quite early in the process, also, they landed on not just a high-performing home, but specifically on targeting Passive House certification, Passive House Classic, and landed on using prefabricated wall and ceiling panel and roof panels from a company called Be Public. And the components from Be Public are what you see here.
And then the number of components may seem restrictive to many, but for us, we kind of love the constraints actually, and the challenge of creating something unique from them. And this side note, this largely stems also from my previous life before architecture. I was a biochemist, and as the DNA is only made out of 4 nucleotides, and we see beautiful things around us everywhere. Next slide, please.
So we took those inspirations from the former house and from Susan and Malcolm and from Be Public and what that system offered as really the main rich sources for our design options. What this shows is some of the many options we showed Susan and Malcolm very early in the process. We wanted to give a lot of options for how the same floor plan could look and feel. So from more or less modern, more or less Southwestern, from flat roofs to gable roofs to hybrid roofs, roof decks. We just really wanted to start and give them a wide range as a starting point. And from this, we worked with them to dial in and refine it and get to the final design where we are today.
In addition to what Kim was saying, how the volumes and openings are molded are largely influenced as well by the site that this that lot is located. Next slide, please.
So we'll show you the final design. This shows on the left the makeup of the house from the Be Public panels. And then on the right, it's a diagram of all the layering that goes into the design. So from the floor plan and the flow that Susan and Malcolm wanted, to how to achieve that efficiently with the Be Public panels, to how the whole thing is clad and expressed in materials, and ultimately how it looks and feels. This is a floor plan. We don't have to go through it. Just to point out, when you saw the initial sketch, this is really quite similar to that. A lot of the open living spaces are along the left side, and that's the west side. You can see some of the large openings with views out to the west, which are the mountain views.
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go back one more. Sorry.
There's like a lag.
Yeah.
Section. So the floor plan was fairly rational and efficient to work with the panels. In the section, we took a little more design liberty, trying to give some variety in ceiling heights for the different type of spaces. So a little more spatial interest and drama and get a bunch of light in. So we developed this system of terracing clerestory windows to the south side, and then again, the large openings on the west side.
And just a note as well that you see colors in this section and plan. So the yellow is this thick insulation from the public, and then that's continuous throughout the house. And we also have this green and red layer outside and inside that are the thermal layer and the airtight layer that's also continuous throughout the house. Next slide, please.
So we'll end on a few interior shots, and this is showing the quality that we were after with that section. It was really important to us and to Susan and Malcolm that even though this is a passive house, that it not be a box, an overly simple box or overly dark. So this is in the main open living space in the kitchen, looking through dining and living, showing the terraced clerestories we have and all the large openings on the right side, which are out to the west.
And from the plan that we got from Malcolm, we also basically make this elevation or section work according to that plan. So from the highest point of the terrace are like the public spaces, the dining room, the kitchen. And as you see this terracing, the space behind that picture frame is the sort of cozy private master's bedroom, main bedroom. Next slide, please.
This is a view from the main entry, from the entry foyer. So ahead of you, you see the large sliding doors out with mountain views, but we also tried to introduce cross views between and throughout spaces. So on the left, we have this interior window that goes through that room to give you some layered views up and through the house and looking to the sky beyond.
And that space just to the left of Kim was talking about is Malcolm's office. So it's got this also its own clerestory as well. And you can see it as you enter the main house. Next slide, please.
This is another entry, this one from the garage. So your view is drawn out immediately through the big window in front of you. But this is also one of the highest spots. So we really wanted to make this feel really vertical. We've termed this the canyon, and it goes down to the basement and then all the way up to clerestory above. It's hard to even capture in a horizontal rendering, but.
Right, so as you enter from the garage and the mudroom is right next to you, to your left. So you see the Rockies right away, straight ahead. And then this, again, as Kim said, this stairs goes down to the basement. And it's hard to, again, show what's in this space, but at least in this render, you can see that there's a light hitting this mural to the left, to the right. That's because there's a clerestory above. So it's hitting this space, a really well-lit space. And personally, this is one of my favorite spaces in the house. Next slide, please.
So this is our last view that we'll leave it on again at the main open living space, and this time from the other side, so from the living room area, looking through the dining room and kitchen and out to the mountains to the left.
Yeah, and we just have to thank our team. Amazing, amazing team.
Yes, it's been a really, really lovely process working with Susan and Malcolm and with Mark and Jonathan from Hammerwell. So
Wonderful.
happy to be able to share it, and here's some other projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, we look forward to getting into it in conversation. So thank you both for that presentation. It's amazing to see panelization manipulated in this way and really show that just about anything is possible. So we want to go to our third and final rebuild of today. One that I'm actually particularly excited about, the Restore Passive House for the Ruprecht family, looking at taking model home and scaling these efforts. Michelle and Peter Ruprecht are are the homeowners that are with us. Rob Harrison is the architect, and Chuck Bauer from Jobert Boutique Building is here. So sticking to form, Rob will provide the overview.
Great. Thank you, Ken. So our, I'll just click through a couple of these quickly. Next slide, please. So basically, we're working in the Sagamore community of Superior, which had a very specific planned development. It was one of those places that were built in the early 90s where open space was reserved and lots were small. Back in February, I was approached by another person who had lost a home in the area, and I wanted to have to work with someone nearby. So I reached out to Andrew Mishler, who's someone that I've always admired, to talk about collaborating on that project. And that particular one didn't work out, but we decided to develop a stock house, basically, that a design that could be built on any lot and rotated and flipped and mirrored, and still we hoped qualify for Passive House. So basically, I'm kind of the lead designer, and Andrew is doing a lot of the all of the Passive House, running the PHPP and design PH and so on, and then Chuck is the builder who's been instrumental in the process. We brought him in. He approached Andrew the possibility of working with him, and we brought him into this project as well. And then also just a couple other shout outs. Chuck has an interior designer, Stephen Andrews, who is working on the project as well. We've developed a palette of materials and appliances and plumbing fixtures and so on that then Stefan can work with our clients to choose. And then also we're working with Tad Everhart of Certifiers to get this certified as Passive House. So Passive House Classic, I guess PHI Classic would be the target for us. And the challenge, of course, is making that happen in a stock house that works on different sites. Next slide. And here are our wonderful clients, Peter and Michelle and Darwin, and they're here today, which I'm really excited about. They have been amazing to work with. So the interesting thing here is that what we have is a design that can be adapted to different people's needs. Let's see, next slide. So here was the, in the center was Peter and Michelle's original house built in the early 90s as part of the Sagamore development. As you can see, the houses are fairly close together. And the lot widths are typically 45 feet with 5-foot setbacks on both sides. Fairly complex HOA requirements. Next. And this is just an amazing, devastating photo of the house next door to Peter and Michelle's, totally engulfed in flames during the fire. Next. And that was the aftermath. This is their actual site. So I think that, part of the thing about this for me is that everyone that we're talking with is dealing with trauma from this experience, and sort of being able to offer the clarity of a house that we can tell them what it's going to cost beforehand. Is really nice. Next. So that's this is a rendering of the initial version of the house. So the garage forward design is kind of part of the deal. We talked about the idea of reworking that and putting alleys in and so on, and just that it was pretty clear early on that did not have the time to do that, and we wanted to be able to get people back in their houses sooner than that would require. So one version of the stock house is with Corten siding here and the metal roofing, no eaves, ventless. It was Firewise before we did before the Sagamore Community WUI ordinance was passed. So Andrew has also had personal experience with the Oakland fire when he was much younger, and that really rebuilding after that, his family home really set the tone for a lot of his work in Colorado. Next. So the basic idea is a cross gable set up so that no matter which way the house faces, we can put PV on the top, and it's going to be in an optimum orientation. Like a couple of the other designs we're seeing here, the garage is not part of the thermal envelope, and that does two things for us. One is create a potential for an outdoor deck, and the other is because the lots are so narrow, we can adapt the shape of the garage to the lot, in this case, a pie-shaped lot, to give our clients a little more space there. In this particular configuration, the house is the front of the house faces east, and the rear faces west toward the view. Next. So if I had a pointer, I would point out that the red dashed lines are the building setbacks. And so there's a 15-foot setback from the front of the lot, and then a 20-foot setback for the garage, and then 5 feet on either side, and an easement, 5-foot utility easement in the back. So they're fairly complex things. Oh yeah, thank you. That we were dealing with and wanting to maximize the potential for the house on the site. And you can see in the sort of light lines there, like most other people's property, they dug out the foundation, and there's a big hole there right now. We also have a house immediately to the south. So modeling that effect on the past house performance was important. This is the basement. The basement in the stock house is unfinished, and so this is a response to Peter and Michelle's request for what they'd like to see in the basement. Next. So it's a very simple plan. We are actually doing stick built. After looking at panelized construction, there were some issues with it because of the narrowness of the lots. We couldn't really accommodate the extra thickness of an install layer, and also the cost of at the time getting the panels to Superior was not going to work for the price point that we were after. So here, what we're seeing, what you can read on the plan there, the kitchen is in the middle, but it's sort of open to both the living room and the dining room through pass-throughs. And the garage, as I said, is sort of adapted to the pie shape of the lot. Next. And upstairs, there's a primary bedroom, primary bath, a front bedroom that could also be an office, a corner bedroom with I'm showing here a bed nook, and a laundry upstairs. So a very simple and universal is the basic idea. Sagamore restricts decks and balconies to the rear half of the house. The vertical line that you see there is the 50% mark of the house, and we can have a balcony there off the primary bedroom that gets a peekaboo view to the west as well. Oh yeah, actually go back one for a sec. So the other thing is that we're doing advanced framing. That is 24-inch centers. I wanted to actually lay those studs out to make the windows work with the stud layout as much as we could. So the blue studs are the ones that are on grid. Next. And then in section again, very simple. We're insulating the garage, but not heating it. Next. Here's just a couple of views of the various angles of the house. So we're really taking advantage of the zoning requirements and setbacks and so on as much as possible. So we have flexibility within the house to adapt to different families' needs. So on the left is the south side. Next. And so we modeled the existing, well, it's not existing now, but their neighbors to the south are rebuilding their house in exactly the configuration that was. So we were able to model the shading from that, and Andrew took that into account in our PHPP. The balcony also provides some shading for the larger windows on the main floor. Next. A couple images from the interior. Now we're basically trying. These are actually from the stock version of the house. So the interior of Peter and Michelle's house is slightly different than this, but you can see the open tread stairs that and a baluster that goes floor to ceiling and becomes the railing on the second floor that filters the light from a window on the top right of the photo there. Yeah, next one. Little view from inside the kitchen. If you stand in exactly the right place, you can look out the kitchen window and between the houses and see the flat irons. And this particular plan had the media room directly connected with the living room. That's why there's that big door on the back there, beside our friend standing there. Next, please. Again, a view from the interior. That's fine, you can go ahead. And again, like everyone else, we are supremely grateful to Peter and Michelle for being fabulous clients and giving us great feedback. And it's been a really great process. So Peter and Michelle are the first people to contract with us to build this stock house. But we've had about 50 inquiries. So we're just kind of hoping that more of them come in the new year when everybody's done with their holidays. I think I'll leave it at that. And we can answer questions. One of the questions I'm sure is, what does it cost? So we can talk more about that.
I'm sure we'll get there. Thank you, Rob. It was terrific. It's great to see push for scalable model of this sort of approach. It's great to see all these different examples coming together, different ways of looking at it, and all going for high performance, low carbon, decarbonized buildings. So now we want to turn the conversation to the different groups briefly before we open it up to a wider conversation. So Kyle, I think we want to spotlight the first group, which was the Lombardo residents. So Kevin and Casey, see you, Morgan, Maggie, and Frank. And Jessica is going to lead our conversation. I will try to chime in support. And let's take it away. Please feel free to put questions into the chat. And the idea is to feed the questions into the conversation as much as we can.
I just want to thank everyone again for those presentations. The projects are so different and show how adaptable and powerful the passive house can be as a pathway, and how many different ways it can kind of evolve depending on the constraints and values of the project and of the client. Kevin and Casey, I really want to start with you guys. You have been, and not everybody has the benefit of knowing you before today, but you've been just an optimistic beacon of sustainability encouragement in our circles, but also across other homeowners. And I just am interested in, and I don't know that I know the answer to this, when you decided and why you decided that this was the right path for you.
I can tell you the exact moment. We, when the fire happened, it's obviously tragic, a lot of trauma, a lot of, picking up the pieces. You wake up one day and you're homeless, and you don't really know, and at that time it was, go here for this deal or this check or this, incentive or whatever. And so it was a whole lot going. And I was managing, I think, a lot of that, running around and then bringing stuff home, and Casey would, go through it all. And
yeah,
it was a very, there's a lot to just like think of to stay afloat. And at that point I was like, a lot of you have probably heard this before. I just was like, just call someone and put a house back. Like, I don't care what it looks like. I just want to live back in my neighborhood. I want to be back in the community.
yeah, he really didn't want anything to do with it. He just wanted to I pick something out and that's it, we're done.
Yeah. And then I saw I think it was the first workshop that the Colorado Green Building Guild did on high performance homes. And that's where I think I learned, I'm also a huge nerd. So, the whole building sciences element to creating this house and rebuilding in a way that really got at our passion for the environment and combating climate change. And, we got really, really excited about it. Like Morgan said, we drank the strong Kool-Aid. We did have these kind of we talked to builders, we'd sit on other webinars and things and be like, we might be able to get something just, way cheaper, and maybe we save our money and we don't do this. And then invariably we just came back to, being able to look our kids in the eye and saying, we did everything possible. We didn't want to be, let's do good enough. Right, like what we think is good enough. We have to do everything that we possibly can. And so, here we are, and trying to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm interested, Maggie and Morgan and Frank, you are, you have years of experience pursuing these types of projects in all sorts of different circumstances. How has this project been different, whether it's been more challenging, obviously, maybe just from the circumstances and the emotional charge of what happened and what we're coming back from as a community, but also logistically as designers, did this create a different set of constraints or opportunities that you hadn't encountered before?
Yeah, I could start that one off. Curious to hear what Frank has to say too, and Maggie, but yeah, I think ultimately it's the whole thing has felt a lot more personal in terms of the design process. And we're used to working with folks that either just bought this nice new piece of land, or they are rebuilding a house or something, whereas this just immediately felt much more intense. And I think that really kind of has overshadowed the entire process largely in a good way. And I think it's meant that, we're super direct and we're very efficient with our time. And, we obviously have taken some priorities in our office for these families just because, like Kevin said, like they want to get back to their neighborhood. So it feels more pressing. And so yeah, it's definitely been more focused, I would say. And along with that, the other side of that would be just the site and the context. It's such a suburban area with these kind of very kind of typical lots, at least in our experience. It seems like some of the other projects have had some different experiences, but in a way, we usually don't work in those neighborhoods. So it's also kind of refreshing to have this new context and to have more variables, or sorry, more restrictions on what we can do is typically a good thing, in terms of the design process and the ultimate kind of completed design and build. Just regards to size of lot, setbacks. There's various HOAs that are kind of in this area. Luckily, we didn't have to work with that with this one, but we are in other contexts. And so I think that has also helped the process and helped the argument for Passive House, just because the lots are relatively small and straightforward, and either you have good orientation or you don't. Either way, it's possible to make it work, but it's a different kind of approach. So those are the things that come to mind.
Frank?
Yeah. Well, I would just, echo what Morgan said just about it being like a very personal and very like emotionally driven project in a lot of ways, I think for everyone. But gosh, I just feel super fortunate to have such great partners like Shape and, Kevin and Casey, especially because they just bring so much like warmth and enthusiasm that really drives the project. And I mean, I feel like this with both Shape and the clients, where I have kind of some of my own priorities, which I have been trying to bring to a lot of my projects. And a lot of times I feel like I'm kind of hedging, or maybe not, I'll bring little topics up, and sometimes people latch on to certain things, but they don't necessarily want to go all the way. And with Kevin and Casey, they're just like, oh, that sounds amazing. Why would we not do that? Like, oh, you want to use more like healthier natural materials? Yeah, of course. Like, oh, you want to concentrate on maybe the embodied carbon of the project? Obviously, like, why wouldn't we do that right now? And Shape as well has been so, I don't know, just open and also collaborative with all that process. And so it's kind of, it just like checks all the boxes of the type of project that you would want, the types of clients and partners you would want. So it's been a really lovely experience actually for me. So I'm just really grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah. And just before I move on to the next group, Frank, do you have other Marshall Fire projects you're working on?
We have one other Marshall Fire project we're working on, planning to start similar time, same neighborhood, with Shape as well. This one's a little different. Clients are a little older. They want to age in place. We kind of went with a single story design. But similarly, like that one actually will be we're also going for Passive House Low Energy, and that one will be essentially a stick frame build with a straw bale exterior wrap. So which we considered for the Lombardos as well, just if we're going all out with low embodied energy and local materials. But with the 3-story design, it just felt like we were trying to put a round peg in a square hole. So anyways, that'll be an interesting one as well. And really excited for both of those.
Awesome. I can't wait to see more about it. Go ahead, Ken.
Throw out a question regarding certification. I mean, one of the things that's kind of unique here, there are many people that are going to build low energy, high performance buildings, but they aren't required to certify. So we generally have, we're constantly looking for levers for people to certify to ensure the performance and get that predicted performance. And here we have a case where you are compelled to because of the incentive money, or that's the deal anyway, right? So just curious about your experience thus far with the certification process. And I know it's still early days, and then going forward, how you see it rolling through the project, and that could kind of go across the board.
Maggie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So we're using, like we mentioned in the presentation, building type to do our energy modeling and basically all of our passive house consulting. And we're also using TAT Everhart to certify low energy. And so far the process has been really amazing. We have gotten so much input from them that's been informative to our design. And I mean, we haven't started their end of the certification process yet. We are basically at this point ramping up for permit submittal, and then certification will come after that. So so far though, it's been really great working with them. And I know Kevin and Casey too have probably some takeaways from this whole process as well, as being new to it.
Well, yeah, I think, we don't know anything else. So this is, to us, this is how you go home, but I mentioned I'm a nerd, right? So like the first thing you get is a, energy model of your house, of your, an energy model of your model house. So all that stuff is super interesting to me. I didn't know what any of it meant. Now I know what some of it means. But I like to learn things like that and apply them to our real life. Yeah.
One last question for you guys. Maggie, you said you're working toward permit submittal. Do you have a goal for permit or start of construction? Just big, broad brushstroke timeline?
Yeah, so we're aiming to get the permit in sometime mid-January. And then hopefully the start of construction could be late spring 2023.
Awesome.
Excellent. So we're moving on to Susan Nadell's house with Kim and Judah Cinco from Baseline and Mark Attard at Hammerwell. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you again, you guys. I'm so excited to see your project coming together, and I'm so encouraged by the work you're doing. You mentioned that you were impacted by the 2017 fire, presumably in California. Did I hear that correctly?
No, my teens. It was in my teens.
Oh, in your teens.
Yeah, not in the US.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Right.
It's an interesting thread. I've heard repeated a lot in this group and in other groups. Andrew, Mitchell are having prior experience. I've had prior experience. You've had prior experience with fire. Did that impact the way you approached this project at all, or your kind of buy-in? Or
Oh, for sure. I felt like it's very personal, for sure, and especially also that we some friends and family lost their homes in the fire as well. So it was really very heavy for us.
Yeah. The other thing that I am just excited about with your project is that this is your first passive house design, correct? And so can you just talk about your journey getting introduced to passive house into this project through the training and what that's been like, how that's changed your practice?
Yeah, I can
Sure,
start.
I can follow up.
The energy consultant we're using for this is Steve Mann, and we've never done a passive house, but before we moved here and before we had Baseline, I worked with him for a decade prior on other homes. So no passive homes in particular, but on lead homes and high performing homes. So that was a really good lead in because we kind of had that rapport, and this, it seems like, you know, in some ways just another version of that. All the strategies are things that we've been interested in for a really long time and always tried to employ. And we kind of always viewed, you know, resilience in a really holistic way and tried to make that as like one of our main tenets of our practice and our research. So for me, I'd say doing this passive house has kind of let us put a name to that. And I guess I'll agree to say we sort of feel like we've drank the Kool-Aid. So it kind of let us categorize something that we already were really interested in working toward, and like give it a certain particular goal and set of metrics to work toward. And moving forward, hope to keep it really central to our practice. It feels so inspiring, and so, you know, like has been said before, this is the way you should build homes. Why would you not build this way? So that feels really inspiring.
Yeah, my experience was more of the opposite of Kim's. I was working in San Francisco with commercial buildings, and we do not quite passive homes, but I guess a lot of architecture firms, we do like sun studies and all these lead sort of checkpoints. But it was so removed that I could never kind of get into it until I met Mark, Mark Attard, and told us about PHN, told us about you, Jessica, and we opened it up, and we're like, what? Like, this is amazing. And so ever since then, we have not returned to the old ways, and we just love the process, and it makes so much sense as this forum sort of demonstrates.
Thank you. Susan, how did you end up with this incredible team, and what brought you to wanting to pursue a passive house project?
Well, thanks for having this forum. I'm sorry my husband Malcolm couldn't be here, but we kind of talked over the questions, and I feel like I'm talking for both of us. It's, you know, in my day job, I work on policies to try to combat our climate crisis. And I immediately wanted to do the most I could possibly do, feeling that everybody has to do their part. There's not one big solution. There's a lot of little solutions, but this is one thing I could do, or we could do, to have a very high performing home. Of course, the terrible smoke we had 2 years ago, you know, I felt like we needed a house that we could shut and have the air circulating that's been cleaned. And also my husband was building passive adobe homes in the 80s in the Taos area. So he had some, I mean, it's changed from them, but he had some building experience, which might be driving our team crazy at times because he probably knows a little bit too much. But, and then I immediately after the fire, Mark, you know, you've been vocal from the very beginning, talking about your experiences. So we connected with Mark at Hammerwell pretty quickly and learned that he was the company was going to open up some spaces to, you know, build back from the Marshall Fire. And then a colleague at my company knows Mark, Judah and Kim. And so I was like, great, we have a team. And they were interested in figuring out passive home. And I thought that was a lovely opportunity to give them a front row seat doing this, knowing that they're excellent designers and can learn quickly. And Mark has a lot of experience. So, you know, didn't it all feel like it was an iffy proposition, and we've just been going full steam ahead and love the B Public panels. It's actually a B corporation in Santa Fe, and the idea of having SIP panels seemed really pretty cool. And you know, we're building for the future, not for the past, and it seemed like this was part of the equation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mark, for those who don't know, you and I have had many phone calls and text messages this year. I'm pretty sure you've made it to my favorites, so sorry about that. And you were on our CGBG hosted an event that Kevin talked about, where we, you know, really raw 2 months or less after the fire, had a very broad conversation about, you know, what to know before you build. And your story being within the burn area was really key to that. And I know motivated you to take a certain role. So can you just, for people who don't know your story, share what your experience was during the fire and how that's impacted Hammerwell and what you guys are doing?
Sure. So I'm going to roll back even before the fires. You know, I came on board with Hammerwell, and in talking with Drew, the owner, we had a commitment. We that we wanted to build better than what we've been doing, and you know, we don't get me wrong. I feel like we built some pretty quality houses in the past, but we felt like that there's things that we could do better that affected the things that we're talking about today: durability, the health of the occupants, the energy efficiency of the building. And we took it upon ourselves to just commit to, we're just going to do this passive house thing. And so we started training all of our project managers, all of our key team members in passive house methodology through a local organization called EMU. And I think that opened all of our eyes up to the just kind of like what Kevin was saying is why wouldn't you build this way? Why? And it's become part of the DNA of Hammerwell, where even if someone says, well, I don't know if I want to certify, it's like, kind of like, well, you're going to get a passive house, so why not certify? Because we don't know how to build any other way at this point. And so, but how that relates back to how does my involvement with the fires is, as you mentioned, I mean, I had neighbors who lost houses. We were very, very, very fortunate that we did not lose our own house. In fact, we just kind of expected it. We kind of left the house that day and just figured we're not coming back to a house because it was just that intense at that particular time. And fortunately, you know, because I've been involved with passive house since, you know, like 2008, 2009, I had been slowly retrofitting my house to passive house standards. And, you know, I started off with some real basic stuff and started working my way up and developed a plan for air sealing and for insulation and for providing a good ventilation system, and with the goal of eventually switching to all electric. And I did that like about 3 or 4 months before the fire. And one of the huge benefits, or a couple of the huge benefits of that, was the fact that we came home the next day after fires. I mean, it was like we were walking past fires. I mean, we were literally walking past little tiny fires all over the place. We get to our home and we walk in and there's literally no smoke smell in the house and no ash. And I know all of my neighbors were severely impacted by that. In fact, we're out of their houses for months while they've mitigated all of that. And then the next day, you know, they turned the electricity on, but they didn't turn the gas on because it was a safety concern. And I was able to flip my furnace on. I was able to flip my ERV on, and I walked in my house and I haven't left it since. And and in the meantime, you know, I mean, like I mentioned, all of my neighbors were out of their houses. In fact, I still have neighbors who are still out of their houses. So it was a huge, it was a much greater impact than we, to ourselves personally, than we would have ever had anticipated.
Yeah. Ken, anything else you want to ask this team?
No, I think let's go on and speak with Michelle, Peter, and their team, and then we can circle back. I certainly have questions, but want to make sure we get through, and then we'll come back around.
Yeah, well, we're just going to do a big open Q&A at the end of this, so everybody can stay on their toes. You don't get to relax yet.
Absolutely. So should we slide over?
Yeah, so Chuck and Rob.
Chuck, Rob, Peter, Michelle.
Peter, Michelle. Hi, Peter. So Rob and Chuck, you know, this project, Andrew started sharing this collaboration you were working on pretty early with me, just through the other efforts we were doing together. And it was just like, yes, somebody needs to do this. Can somebody please do this? Who has the bandwidth to do this? This is the thing to do. How do we, take a development approach and give, Rob, I think you said it really truthfully, in how do we take some of this burden away from a homeowner and give them a clear answer? Because for some people, that is the best gift you can give them, is just clarity. And so I don't know if you two just want to speak to how that started, how Chuck got involved, and what you've learned from this, I assume is your first approach at kind of a model home product. And how much does it cost? Because everybody wants to know.
Well, this is the first time that I've done anything like this, in terms of designing a house that is more universal, that could be adapted to different families and different sites even. So that's a new thing for me. I normally do custom houses, and I've been doing passive house since 2009 also, and one of the first 100 people that got certified as a passive house consultant. And actually a little bit of history. Also, I was one of the people that started the Northwest Eco Building Guild.
Oh yeah.
Back in 1992 or so,
Mhm.
on which the Colorado Green Building Guild is modeled. So that's pretty exciting for me to see that model going out. And what that model was a vertical organization that included everybody that was involved in the building process, not just like a horizontal trade association type of thing, like the AIA or master builders or things like that. But it was everybody that was involved in the process, which as Brian Berry says, passive house is a team sport, and we really all need to be working together on this. And that's one of the things that's been remarkable about this process for me. Chuck, maybe you want to pipe in?
Yeah, I think the initial question that we had, and we come from the custom world also, and with a lot of times larger budgets than what we were trying to get with it on this, but we had the question of, can we create a passive house and build a passive house that was in the mid $300 a square foot range, and maybe with some of the incentives get to the low 300s a square foot to build it. And so that was kind of our mission. And we got to work. A lot of this is getting with the trade partners that we have, and of course we benefited by this being so widely known, the victims of the Marshall Fire. So the sell wasn't too bad to get these trade partners to come to the table and suggest value engineering here, and let's do this, let's do that. But we got some incremental savings across the board, but at the end of the day, they totaled to be something substantial that we were able to meet those price range goals that we had wanted to meet from the beginning. So that's kind of how we achieved that. And our pricing is around the $600,000 range, and with the incentives, we're down in the $550,000 range for the model that Rob showed you previously. So I think we achieved our goals. I don't know, you'll have to ask Peter and Michelle to get some of their feedback. And we still have a ways to go. We still have some numbers we're waiting on in engineering and things like that, but everything's tracking really well from that standpoint. So I think it can be done. We can give people with a modest budget a passive house, and that was our goal.
The other kind of little bit of history I want to share for those who aren't local. In the beginning, in the spring, we had a builder expo that I was not part of organizing, but did attend. And one of the strategies from really early on was taking these very close knit neighborhoods. I mean, these homeowners, this is something that's really impacted me this year, is you guys don't just want to go back to your homes. You want to go back to your neighborhood, back to your neighbor. And that, I think, was such a huge driver in what fueled homeowners and in turn inspired all of the people that came around and participated this year. But homeowners were working to band together and find savings through having one builder do X number of homes in one subdivision. And so this really leans into that strategy that was talked about early on. And I really hope that it continues to evolve for you. Peter, I'm so excited to hear about your experience with this. And I know Rob said they had a lot of inquiries and you're the brave soul who's going to take the first step, and we applaud you for it. You're in good hands. But what has this been like for you, and what helped make your decision?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like everybody else, after the fire, we were pretty shell-shocked. Our number one motivation was to just get back into a house. And of course, that continues to be a very strong motivation. We would like to be back in a house as soon as we can. But, you know, as we started thinking a little bit more about it, we thought more about livability issues, you know, even temperatures, soundproofing, fireproofing, filtered air, and all those kinds of things that, you know, we had heard about were possible. And then we also made a budget that we thought we could pay. And unfortunately, when we started talking to designers and builders, their estimates were like literally twice our maximum budget. Mm-hmm. And so we really kind of gave up on a passive house type of build until this restore model came out. And so it's kind of like almost production house prices with all the benefits of the passive house. And so honestly, it didn't take Michelle and me too long to think about, you know, making the switch from a conventional house to something that really met the comfort and energy goals that we also kind of had in the background at the price point that we could stretch up to.
That's really exciting. And so you guys mentioned you're in the process. What do you think your outlook is for permit or start of construction? I think I saw it go into the chat, but I've been a little distracted, so I didn't get the pleasure of reading it.
As I said in the chat, I think we're hoping to get in for a permit mid-January or a little bit earlier if we're waiting on structural. And then I think Chuck is chomping at the bit to get started. And we're targeting finishing by the end of December 2023, because the rental subsidies run out at that point. At least they do now. So we're hoping that we can get the project complete enough to move in anyway by that point.
That's awesome. It's interesting. I touch base with a lot of the local jurisdictions pretty frequently and get permit updates, and they say, okay, this is how many people are in for permit, and this is how many people are going for these energy tiers. And I keep telling them it's coming. The passive house projects are coming. Like the wave is coming. It's just slower. It's a delayed reaction to the work. And it does take, you know, as we all know, it takes more work on the front end to get that product. But I'm really excited to see
actually, Jessica, talking about permitting, we actually have ours somewhat. We submitted ours 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Well, we submitted, middle of November. We just heard it's all approved. It hasn't been issued yet, so it's coming. It was an exciting thing on Friday. But.
So, Mark, when's groundbreaking? Do we need to spray paint a gold shovel?
Well, we have to plan a whole event around the groundbreaking, so that's going to take at least a month to plan that.
Just don't do it this week. It's awful cold.
Yeah. No, we're planning to break ground right after the new year. We obviously, there's some preliminary things like getting the project staked, but yeah, we're planning to move right into it after the first of the year.
What do you think the construction duration will be for your project, Mark?
Right now, we have a preliminary schedule of completion and move in beginning of November 2023.
All right, guys, I think we're racing. The three of you have very similar timelines. I'm going to start like a virtual tracker on the CGBG website, and we'll have Mark's head and Chuck's head. It'll just, march along. Frank can be in there too. Okay, well, thank you for letting us kind of highlight each team and follow up with these first round of questions. Ken, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I think let's open it up. Let's open it up. And definitely, I think the cost question is one that, comes up, of course. This is high quality construction. So how do you control costs? And it's built to last. So it's not the status quo, and how do you manage that? So it's great to see, the Restore House is kind of like taking that head on. And making that accessible. I'm wondering, with the other projects, how you're feeling and how that's being managed. Every project is different. It's particularly custom home building. And do we see daylight and or what choices maybe in the process? And what, one of the questions I had early on too was in my head anyway, was when you decided to do Passive House, how that kind of shifted the priorities, or did it shift priorities? And all of a sudden you have to make a whole suite of decisions. And to maintain Passive House, it's not conventional construction plus and dovetailing. So I don't know if
yeah, Susan, are you still around? I'm interested if you want to chime into this, or we can kick it to Kevin and Casey. And we talked about this really early on, there are always compromises. And in that first event, we talked about, what do you care about the most? And how does that thing inform the next thing you care about the most? So I'm interested, Susan, have there been kind of roadblocks or moments where you said, ugh, but this is important and I'm going to keep this decision, or any of those barriers where you felt the goals of Passive House kind of bump up against the amenities you had in mind when you started the process?
I have to honestly say, it's from that perspective, there's been no major roadblocks to our expectations. I knew from the outset that I wanted to be electric only. So, people who are mourning the loss of their gas fireplaces, which we had one too, it's like, good riddance. I'm not going to deal with it anymore. This is a new day. We do want to age in place. I think we're older than all the other two families that you've highlighted. Our kids are grown. We did really like the layout because we actually had a ranch before, but and we liked the layout the way we could have our own main bedroom and the guest rooms, which are, because there's no more kids on the other side of the house. So the question is with the layout that we really enjoyed, could we actually make it passive?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really interesting learning experience. And could we do it with these B public panels that were like a, jigsaw puzzle?
Mm-hmm.
But, Kim and Judah, you've done it. So we're just really pleased. And we have these beautiful picture windows. I guess one of the things is the cost of windows, to get a big window that is also passive. It's like, okay, we've already nixed the first choice and we're on the second choice because they're so darn expensive. So the value engineering is ongoing, and I think that's where the compromises are coming in.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of every project. And if you at least in this way, you're getting this other value and on top of that. So The windows are pricey though, I'll give you that. Kevin, Casey, what, was there a similar moment for you guys, or any things you've bumped up against that
There's been,
driven Maggie crazy?
I don't think we've ever told them or like have come to them.
Yeah.
It's been,
We resolve it internally first.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have come up with like, you know, like financially, how the heck are we gonna make
Mhm.
this work? And I think like the boys are, our kids are a main driver. They're very much in love with animals and the planet and everything. So whenever we're like, I don't think we can do this, I don't think we can afford this, then they're crying about the extinction of animals or, you know, whatever
Yeah.
they're upset about. We're like, no, we have to,
Yeah, we gotta do it.
we have to do this. But it's usually been financial, like it's usually
Yeah.
been the financial aspect of it, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I care about the function
Mm.
of the house. I still don't really care what it looks like.
Well, it's beautiful, so.
I know,
In case you didn't figure it out, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, I've said a couple of times, I feel like I don't belong in that house necessarily. But you know, Casey really, I think, helps balance that out, and she's got a very great eye and very artistic, and it could all be a white cube for all I care. You know? As long as it performs, right? As long as, you know, the energy bills are what the energy bills are. And,
Oh, engineers.
yeah, yeah.
Peter, for you coming into a fairly pre-baked product, I know you've made maybe some minor adjustments and it looks like, you know, developed the basement. Has that been a hard pill, or has that been a relief, or what was that like for you?
It's been kind of interesting actually, because we had a we had a floor plan that we really liked before, and our goal was really to try and get something back very similar to that. And the house that Rob has designed for us, or that has designed, is really very different than what we had before. And as we thought about it, we started finding things like, oh yeah, you know, that this new way is actually a little better. Oh yeah, we're glad we've got that. Oh hey, wow, that looks a little blocky, but boy, it's going to be fire resistant. And we also kind of thought that it would be weird going. Eventually, we realized that it would be weird to go back to a house that was similar, kind of very similar to our old house, but not the same. And we thought there would just be weird vibes with, you know, the trauma of losing the previous house and being kind of reminded of what that was like. So I guess that the short answer to that is it took a little bit of a head change to go to a design that was different than what we were expecting. But it turns out that we think it's going to be better, way better than it would have been to go back to a similar design.
And that, I mean, I hadn't really thought about that, the idea of going back to a house, you know, I know, and some people are taking this approach where they're rebuilding exactly what was there, and just the surreal nature of that after everything you've experienced. So thank you. I'm so excited. I know we're coming up against time here, Ken. Do you want to do?
Yeah,
Close out?
maybe one last round or
Sure.
I think, well, what I had in my mind was just a question of kind of legacy that was brought up before. And curious, just for the homeowners, but also the professionals, contractors, in terms of how you see the conversation evolving or changing within the community, with your peers, colleagues, if there has been any evolution in that conversation. I know there was a kind of a big pushback right against the green codes, which you had mentioned earlier, Jessica. And this is going in the completely opposite direction. So I don't know, maybe if you
Yeah, I
want to
kind of
jump
want to
in.
just give everybody, you know, the 1-sentence answer, 2-sentence answer of what your experience has been. And I'll just start by saying that and I said this before, you know, the homeowners have shown their muscles in this situation, not only as people willing to get in the trenches and understand building science. I mean, we had homeowners on webinars that kept saying, you don't need to understand all this. And they're like, we don't care. We're going to understand all of it because I want to make sure my builder does it. And this is, I'm in. And it was just so incredible. And what I've seen personally, and maybe the people who just don't want to be part of the conversation anymore have found a way to avoid me, but there are more homeowners asking more architects and more builders questions that they can't get around, and putting pressure on more designers and more builders and professionals all across the Front Range, you know, to step up. And I know this community has been working towards Passive House for all sorts of different timelines, but here all of a sudden, because of these empowered homeowners, I've seen just this massive change in a year of attitude. And so I'm really interested to see if, you know, Chuck, you're next on my list. So I'm just going to call you guys off as you're in order here for me. If that's been your experience, or if you've seen had the opposite experience, or.
No, I think so. I think, you know, we're talking to more and more people about this. From our standpoint, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, why wouldn't somebody opt to go down this road? But there's a lot of factors, and we understand that. But I think, you know, the wave continues to get bigger and stronger for this type of building. You know, we've, like Mark, as a business, we've taken the stand that, you know, we're not going to build the old way. We're going to build to a different, higher standard. You know, so, you know, even the trade partners and the professionals are kind of making a stand that this is how we want to continue to build. So
That's awesome. Rob?
I actually just had one other thing to add to the timeline question, and that we signed a contract with Peter and Michelle on, I think it was November 11th. So that's one advantage of having a sort of a basic design in place.
Yeah.
You know, that we can go from signing a contract to submitting the permit in a couple months.
In a few months. Yeah, that's incredible.
And the other just thing to add about the cost for us is that the cost that we're mentioning here includes you know, the survey, the geotech report, my design services, you know, the services of Stefan, the interior designer, you know, the certification process, the certification consultant. It's a whole package. So so that was one of the things that we realized early on was important to develop a thing that people could just sign on the dotted line, and then we take care of everything. So that's I think that's one thing that is different for me than my typical custom home design process, which, you know, usually takes more like a year.
Peter, have you sensed in the community, in the homeowner sort of circles, any changes from those early days of protests against the Louisville building codes to now? Or do you still feel like it's a mixed bag of different opinions?
Yeah, well, so Superior didn't have as strict of codes as Louisville did. Like you know, there was no net zero.
Yeah.
And Superior has actually really been extremely responsive to the, you know, financial and other needs of the people who are rebuilding. So they're supporting Code Basic all the way up to Passive House. And I think among people who are rebuilding, there are people who are interested in doing the absolute minimum because they have to, just for a price, from the price perspective. And, you know, other folks who are, you know, looking at some additional options in a variety of different ways. So I think it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I think that, you know, and magic for me of the way Xcel approached these rebates and the way we CGBG tried to approach this year was, you know, not to offend anybody in this group, but yes, passive house, but yes, also to this spectrum of performance based on your values and your needs, and helping homeowners realize that they get to make a choice, and they, you know, and depending on their means or their circumstance or whatever, those options can be wider or more narrow, but there isn't a default necessarily that they get to have a voice in that conversation. So hopefully, if nothing else, at least those homeowners are being able to make up their own mind and in an educated way. Susan, what has your experience been kind of dabbling in this in your work life also?
You know, I'm glad to hear about other people in the neighborhood that are interested. I feel like there is a hesitancy to move forward, and that's why policies are so important, because people really can't imagine it, and you know, I'm sorry, but the building industry drags its feet and has to be forced to do something, and then they say, oh, we can't possibly do this economically, and then they are forced to do it. It's like, well, it turns out it's really possible to do it. So so to get neighbors to push is very hard. It's like it's got to be pulled because the policies change. So my feeling is, you know, let's do a progressive open house when we have our houses done. Let's try to educate as soon as we can, because not everybody's building back as quickly as we are. There's, you know, like Louisville has like 160, 180 permits either done or in process. You know, there's still 300 houses yet to be built in Louisville alone. Why not really make this an educational event and to you know, relieve some of the fears that people have of doing something new, because it's hard. It's really tough. People are scared. They're underfunded like we are, and most people are, for the rebuild, and they just want to get back into a home and can't really have the bandwidth to envision something better and less expensive to operate. So it's a huge education process. So I really appreciate, Jessica, what all you're doing and what you know, the Guild is doing, and it's just like, keep on keeping on.
Well, we're going to take you up on that open house offer, Susan, for sure. I've already warned all your builders, but we got to keep doing this.
Absolutely.
I should give a plug. In June, we have International Passive House Open Days. So, and construction sites are welcome to be, that's sometimes the more interesting to see how they're coming together.
Mark, you're next on my screen. I know that you, living in the neighborhood, have clenched your jaw a little bit driving past homes that are built with no improvement whatsoever, and you find that frustrating. But do you feel any sort of momentum building, or in the professional world, in the trade world, or based on the homeowners you talked to through this whole last year?
Yeah, I think I mean, sure. You know, I'm gonna go buy any house, and I'm gonna, because it's just what I do, you know, I'm gonna have some sort of comment, right? But no, I think that there's a lot of interest. I think on the homeowner side, one thing that I'd like to point out, and I think is a big shout out to at least Louisville as a municipality, is that we were struggling with a couple of things as the way the PHPP handles things from a heating and cooling standpoint, and we went to the city, and I mean, we got like 10 seconds into the meeting, and we were like, fine, you're building passive house, fine. You don't need a HERS, you don't need a manual J, a manual D. So they've been super accommodating, and I think as a municipality, they're definitely interested in even pursuing that even further. You know, they had a big blow as it related to the pushback for their 2021 code, but in a lot of ways, in some respects, that's been positive, because I think a lot of people have started to talk about it, and it isn't just homeowners. I mean, I see architects and I see builders who probably would have had no interest in this whatsoever, that are have gained interested in getting trained, and at a minimum, bringing a team together that can put together a passive house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kim, Juta, you guys have a very kind of fresh perspective coming in from a long career in sustainable construction, but also new, relatively like me, to the Front Range and new to passive house certification. What has that been like for you guys? Or what have you seen? What's your observation over the year?
I would say, I mean, one thing that stands out is that in custom building, usually there's self-selection, right? People are coming because they're deciding they want to build a home. And then we have this event where all these people were thrown into this, need, might not like the process or have picked the process at all. So I think the onus is on us all here as people who were interested from the get-go, and us as professionals to just educate, because I agree with what Susan was saying too, that it's really just all about fears and not knowing and just needing to be educated about it. Seems like people are widely really open to hearing and learning, but in the onslaught of everything that everyone had to deal with, it's just a whole other set of things to have to know and figure out. So I can totally understand the reservations and the fears, and for people who wouldn't have certainly not chosen to be in this situation. So I think the more that these events can happen and this dialogue can happen, and the more examples that start getting built and popped up as physical examples, will just make it that much more real for someone to be able to kind of understand, okay, I could do that. So I think this first wave is really promising.
Right. And the one thing for me, a great learning experience was, as in construction, you always ultimately have a team that you work with. And we didn't quite know, like, where do we go when it comes to passive house? And so Mark was basically the impetus of that. He was he created that from like a center point. And then from there, we started to learn to meet all new consultants that we did not even know exist. And so it was just a mind-blowing experience, that this whole new world that nobody's ever tapped into, or very few. And it was so rich. And then for us, it was just there's no way that we can go back. And if we do, then I don't know. I don't know what that would be.
Kevin, what about you? I know you're sharing optimism all the time, but I'm sure you run into plenty of roadblocks in that too. So
yeah, I mean, I like Susan, I see a lot of resistance. I hear, we're kind of used to being the crazy folks on the block, but we're a little weird. I do see a lot of excitement around it, a lot of questions being asked, and a lot of it would be great if everyone went all the way passive, but we get just individual questions about heat pumps, insulation, things like that, and so there's a lot of interest. What is baffling to me is kind of the other industries, the kind of real estate, right? They're kind of grappling with how to deal with high performance homes. Insurance seems like they might want to give us a whole bunch of money to build the highest quality home we can, so that their risk is reduced a little bit, and that doesn't seem to factor into the equation. So I'd like to see some of those extended industries kind of understand what this stuff means, and how it can actually impact them and their risks and resale value and stuff. Yeah. So
it's so absolutely true. And we have, so Rob was talking about how CGBG is kind of the everybody that touches a building kind of organization, which is absolutely true. And we have a newer member who joined in the fall, and she's an appraiser for a bank. And she started coming because she was like, I keep seeing all these houses and I don't know what to do. I don't understand it. And I was like, thank you for being here. This is great. How do we get more of you? So I think that's really true, especially with insurance, and it impacts everything. So Maggie and Morgan, I'm going to kind of lump you two together. I know you've got, we're starting, finishing where we started with you two, who just have been Morgan, I know your practice has been pushing passive house in Colorado. At least from my perspective, it was one of the things that I was like, okay, so Shape does this, and coming into Colorado. So what is the last 12 months felt like? Has it felt different at all, or is it just the slow build is continuing and we're going to keep grinding?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. Obviously, there's been this huge push, and I think part of the reason why a lot of us are here right now is Xcel. So I think, that rebate, we've been doing, 75 to 90% passive houses over the last decade, and we're pretty good at selling that low hanging fruit of like mechanical ventilation, right? And better windows and more healthy interior. But it doesn't do much for the movement in general. And that's something that we're obviously very passionate about moving as well. And I think that the incentive, the rebate, basically almost covers that 90%, right? Or that leftover 10% to get to certification. And I think that has been extremely helpful and has really given the whole movement a huge boost over the last 10 years. And I also think obviously the builders like Frank and Mark and, no one listens to architects when we talk about cost, and having builders on board and getting more interested and passionate about this and becoming the educators is completely critical. And, I've seen, it seems like there's been a lot of growth and a lot of builders either learning that through EMU or whoever else, and getting passionate about it and sharing that knowledge with architects and homeowners. And so I think those are the couple takeaways.
You set me up perfect for Frank, who's going to wrap us up. As our last builder, Frank, how's that been? I mean, I think it's so true. I'm an architect and I don't want to really talk about numbers myself with anybody. I have one piece of the puzzle and you guys have the other, but there's also, the process of bringing trades along and finding teams that work cohesively. Are you seeing changes over the last couple of years and in your own practice and in the subs you're collaborating with?
Yeah, I think when it comes to cost generally, it's always challenging because there's so much give and take, and people have their own expectations coming in about what their neighbors are doing or what they're seeing around town or whatever. And then trying to put that into this passive house framework is like, well, maybe if we simplify this or that, so it's like the give and the take and finding the right clients. But yeah, the incentives are huge. Finding trade partners who are interested. I definitely feel like, mechanicals are probably the most challenging just because you want someone who's going to commission it properly and everything like that. But, for electricians and plumbers, we haven't really had much pushback there. It's mostly just like, hey, here's the system we want. And they're like, great, I'll price that. So that hasn't really been too bad from my perspective, at least. I think the other thing, just for us, we're a pretty small company. We're not really planning on growing that big. We're not really planning on building, 10 houses a year. So a little plug for CDBG, being part of the board and being part of this educational process this whole year, us just the guild just concentrating on Marshall Fire has been super meaningful and fulfilling. And also, it's the reason I got the clients I did. If I wasn't part of CGBG, I may not have gotten Kevin and Casey or the other build for the spring, just because I was showing up to these events, I was presenting, being a part of that. And also just such a big part of our mission is just because we're small, we're not going to scale. It's super important to be able to share information, be collaborative, and come up with systems that meet the goals of the high performance side of things, while also hopefully giving a constructability and price point that helps the client. So just really, I'm very optimistic about the future, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Frank. Ken, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, I think we're
Final words?
beyond time, aren't we? Thank you all for for hanging in there with us. I mean, this is truly inspiring, invigorating, and I learned a lot. And we look forward to 2023 and seeing these projects going forward and many more. I know there's been talk of there being at least 20 or so passive houses seeming to come into the pipeline, and to see that potentially grow beyond. We are, as an organization, the Passive House Network, continuing to find ways to support. We do have these open days, which I threw out there earlier, and they are key ways of bringing in new people to see and share and tell the stories, and on the job sites and in the final buildings. We'll actually be doing a series of events in Colorado this year, because at the end of September, the beginning of October, we're having our national conference in Denver. And we're looking forward to being able to tell this story as it develops, and sharing it, because it's inspiring locally, regionally, no doubt, but across the country and around the world. Super important to see this happening all the way down. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you particularly to the owners for putting it all out there with architects and builders. Jessica, CGBG, we're looking forward to partnering with you through our chapter, Passive House Rocky Mountains, and hope everybody stays involved in one way or another. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.